My name is Dr. Melissa McCrae. I am a board-certified family practitioner, and I practice functional medicine. We have 2 office locations in Mansfield, Ohio, and also in Powell. Functional medicine is really all about looking for the root cause of disease, and that's really our passion here. Is we dig deep and we find out what's happening, and then we understand fully that if you give the body what it needs, it will respond. So that's who we are. That's what we do. And we're really happy that we have the practice that we have here. Okay, so again, we're really focusing on everything and all is about functional medicine, but we actually have some goals that are very important to the practice. And for those who are patients, it's something that we want to be in every visit and every experience they have. So our goal at Vitality is to provide life-changing, patient-centered medical care, and we strive to enhance patients' lives with innovative medical treatments. That includes staying up on the newest health trends or the latest trends or what exactly is happening in medicine. So we hope that you'll find this information helpful tonight on fasting. We've had a lot of questions coming up about fasting lately. It's been in the media a lot, although it's been around for centuries. So our goal is to figure out how we can utilize the wisdom of our body to be healthy. And in particular, what we need to do is we need to actually change our thoughts and to be open-minded to allow the knowledge that's out there to actually work for us. So what is fasting? Literally, there are scientific and medical journals out there with hundreds of papers all dealing with the therapeutic uses of fasting. It's been extensively used in the treatments of a lot of different conditions, including obesity, diabetes, seizure disorders, coronary artery disease or heart disease, congestive heart failure or cancer, and also in a lot of autoimmune diseases. So fasting is literally just the abstinence of some foods or drinks for a set period of time. Now, there's a lot of different ways to talk about fasting, and probably one of the biggest things we can look at is our society tends to just eat too much, too often throughout the day. So the little cartoon I thought was just kind of funny because literally, if we could try to get people to just fast between meals, we would probably improve the health of our country quite a bit. But there's 2 main influences that seem to be the key factor in what actually causes fasting to work, and that's more of the circadian rhythms and something called autophagy. So keep those words in mind. So let's look a little bit at the 3 phases of fasting and kind of get some background info into why this is actually working. There's a couple of different phases we look at. The first phase is more of the gastrointestinal phase or the fed state. So this is when you eat something and your body is actively processing it in your stomach and it goes into your small intestine. You're using the glucose and the amino acids and the fats from that meal, and they're being absorbed into the digestive tract. Phase 2 actually lasts for up to 2 days. So anywhere from that 8 to 12 hours to 2 days. And this is when your body has used up all the immediate food, and now it's starting to use the glycogen. Now, glycogen is actually how your body stores, it's more of a storage form of sugar. So in phase 2, your body's going to start using that glycogen reserve that's stored in the muscle and liver cells. This is able to fuel the brain, and it gives your body everything that it needs to work on. It's a very clean type of energy that it's burning at this point. Now, at phase 3, what happens is your body switches from using glucose to burning fat for metabolism. So this is actually when true fat burning occurs. It can start 12 hours after your last meal, but it can often take up to 2 days to fully switch over to this natural fat burning, and we call it ketosis state. If your body was unable to do this, then it would turn to burning protein for energy, which we know is something that would be very, very harmful. So in fact, within 10 to 12 hours from your last meal, 50% of fuel that your body is using comes from fat. So when we talk about fasting, you're going to hear that 12-hour window being discussed a lot, and you're also going to be hearing about this 2 to 3 day interval that's very, very important when we talk about fasting. So now, based on why does fasting actually work, there's a couple of concepts that you have to keep in mind. The first one is about circadian rhythms. So circadian rhythms are really your body's clock, and it tells your body when it's asleep or when it's awake, and it regulates physiologic processes. So if you're thinking, we're talking about fasting here, why is she talking about when I'm eating or when I'm awake and when I'm sleeping? Well, amazingly enough, your body works very, very intricately based on the regulation of this day-night cycle. So did you know that every hormone produced by every gland in your body is released based on whether it's day or night? We know that hormones turn on and off every single reaction we have out there. So if every hormone actually functions based on day and night, this is pretty important. The other things that happen based on day and night, cell renewal happens at that time, immune balancing occurs in a day and night schedule, and hormones are released. So this is where we're going to start talking about a few keywords. So we're going to get into our vocabulary lesson for the week. And it all falls into place when we talk about circadian rhythms. So genetics, nearly your entire genetic DNA makeup of 20,000 genes is programmed to turn on and off at certain times of the day. So that's crazy important when we know that our whole genetic makeup turns on and off depending on what our circadian rhythm is like. Now, epigenetics, that's the study of how it's turned on and off. And then we get to something called the timing code. The timing code out of all of these is the one thing you can control. So the timing code is basically ensuring that your body is sticking to a circadian rhythm. It is you controlling when you wake up, when you go to bed. It's your body's ability to stick to a schedule so that those 20,000 genes that are turned on and off know when that happens. It's key in the fasting protocols, whether you're doing intermittent fasting or whether we're talking about something more like prolonged fasting. So your body has to know when it's day or night. And so if you think of that like an analogy, if they're working on a highway and it has all these red lights and green lights on it, green light is daytime when traffic is flowing heavily. But if they really want to effectively repair that highway, they're going to wait until nighttime. They'll have all the lights turn red, and they're going to repair the road when things are not moving as quickly. So that's what needs to happen in our bodies. So resting your body system at night tends to be when all the repair tends to happen. Now, if you guys want examples of why this is so important for circadian rhythms, we know that 1 in 5 people work shift work in the United States, and so they're more or less the guinea pigs for this disruptive pattern that can happen. There are 100 different documented diseases that shift workers are at increased risk of. We know that diabetes is the top disease that shift workers will be diagnosed with, and they have 2 times the risk of getting cancer. So when you look at time code, the one thing that you can control about how your genes and your DNA worked, when your DNA is out of whack, your body is definitely going to pay the price. So let's talk about our other vocabulary word I want you guys to all be familiar with, and this is called autophagy. So a group of scientists actually won the Nobel Prize in 2016, and it's called, basically it means to eat thyself. So what happens is the body has an amazing ability to get inside the cell, clean out all the garbage and debris, and recycle the nutrients. We've known that this can happen, but they didn't know exactly how it can happen in what states. Well, guess what? It turns out that autophagy happens in a state of fasting. So in a fasting state, the body can actually purify its tissues and eliminate that cellular garbage. So it's a perfect opportunity to let those tissues heal. So we know that chronically inflamed cells don't live as long because there's all this cellular debris, just like sludge in the cell. So in diseases like Alzheimer's, we get these neurofibrillary tangles, and in multiple sclerosis, we get plaques. All of those go on to produce chronic damage. So being able to repair ourselves and make use of the nutrients was a major scientific finding. So what turns those on and off? Stress on the cells and fasting. So autophagy is what makes us a very efficient machine. It allows us to help repair faulty parts. We can target abnormal cell growth like cancerous growth quickly, and we can also stop metabolic dysfunction. So autophagy, keep that in mind, that it happens when we have stress cells and we're in a fasting state. So people say, well, do I even need to fast? Like, why would I want to fast? Well, when you fast, there's a couple different things that happen in the body, both on a cellular and molecular level. The first one is when you're fasting, your body is going to have a more regulated release of hormones. So As we've talked about on many talks before, hormones essentially control our body. They're the keys to reactions happening. They help with fat storage and how our body works. Your cells also initiate a repair process. So if you're somebody who thinks that your hormones are not functioning the way they should, or you feel like you've got some inflammation in your system, or your body could really use some repair, then we need to keep talking about fasting a little bit more. So specifically, if you're thinking, well, what kind of reactions can happen? Insulin sensitivity improves dramatically, and so that can help us metabolize sugar better. We see changes in growth hormone, and that helps aid in fat loss and also keeping our lean muscle. We see delayed aging. As far as cognition and memory goes, thought processes are clear, and we can actually help with memory. There's some great studies we have on how fasting can prove that. Cellular repair, and of course, gene expression. So we're back to autophagy and the circadian rhythm and how it affects our genetic profile. So all of these things happen when we fast. So a lot of people will say what types of fasting, or they'll throw out different types. So let's just run down a couple of the list common things that we hear. Time restricted fasting, which is also really the same as intermittent fasting. We have prolonged fasting, water fast, juice fast. We know that there's many cultures that do a religious fast. Eating disorders are a type of pathologic fast. And then we have things like the fasting mimicking diet. So the couple that we're going to focus on tonight is more time restricted fasting, also called intermittent fasting. We're going to talk about prolonged fasting just a little bit. And then we're also going to talk about periodic fasting. Those three really encompass the major groups that we have out right now. And those three in particular are also the ones that we have the scientific evidence showing that they improve longevity. So we're going to stick to the ones that improve longevity right now. So time restricted, we can either call it time restricted fasting or time restricted feeding. Basically what this is you eat a certain amount of numbers out of the day, and then you don't eat for the other hours of the day. So 12 and 12 is the most common. Many times people will skip breakfast to do this, or they'll skip dinner. And so there's a lot of, that'll be a whole nother topic of conversation. But when we're looking at a 12-hour fasting window, that's the most common. Sometimes you'll see a 16-hour and an 8-hour method. All of those where you realize we're reaching that 12-hour time limit where we can cross over into that phase 3 of fasting. But really in time restricted feeding or time restricted fasting, intermittent fasting, what's really happening is we're just getting that 12-hour break. So we're doing the time coding. So we're letting our body know when it's good to repair and when it's good to feed. So we see a lot of amazing benefits with time restricted feeding. There's an amazing researcher, Dr. Sachin Panda, and he is probably our leading researcher we have on things like time restricted fasting. He was the original one who did the studies, and his first study was on mice, and he let these mice have free reign when they wanted to eat, whether it was day or whether it was night, but they had a designated amount of food. And then what he did is he took a separate group of mice, and they were given the same amount of food, the same amount of calories, but they were restricted as to when they ate it. And what they found is the mice who were allowed to eat whenever they want, they actually gained a significant amount of weight, and they got really, really heavy, versus the mice who were only eating in a 12-hour window, a restricted time frame, but the same amount of calories, they actually stayed slimmer, and they actually increased their performance and their lean muscle mass over time. So time restricted feeding is something that we know works well. We've seen diseases like diabetes and obesity improve. But we're really focusing on now with that is optimizing that circadian rhythm and resetting when the body knows it's supposed to release hormones and when we're genetically supposed to turn things on and off. So when we look at prolonged fasting is any fast that lasts 2 days or longer. So these are more common if you think of like a water fast. And there are some centers that you can actually go to. There's a center that's probably most well known out in California called True North, and they do medically supervised water fast. So if somebody is going to do a fast longer than 2 to 3 days, it's very, very important that they need to do that under supervised conditions, because we start to see some metabolic issues pop up. A lot of those are really good, but at the same time, you can have some changes happen that are not necessarily good. So prolonged fasting, we touch on just a little bit, because there are places that can go fasting up to 40 days actually with a water fast. This puts the body in more of a body stressed mode, and we know we get cellular repair when that happens. After 72 hours, your body stimulates actually a self-renewal of all stem cell lines. So that's very, very exciting. So we get a lot of benefits after that 2-day mark. Autophagy really kicks in, so you're cleaning out those cells. So imagine if you're cleaning out the debris in all those cells, if your body is burning a very, very clean fuel and detoxing, and then if you can have this renewal of stem cell lines to replace the weakened cells, that's actually what's happening in a prolonged fast. What's interesting is it's almost like this reboot of our body. So you can do a cellular reboot on a prolonged fasting protocol. Culturally, we're very far away from this type of regulation of doing a fast that long. It seems like snacks are common all through the day. So doing a fast like this is actually unusual, but very, very, very powerful. Some possible indications for this, if you're going to undergo stem cell therapy, so for instance, PRP therapy or maybe a medical treatment or chemotherapy, imagine being able to regenerate your entire stem cell line before you go into a procedure like that. So even in our cosmetic treatments, if we're able to boost that stem cell response, we can get even better results. Okay, so now let's talk about periodic fasting and the fasting mimicking diet. So fasting mimicking diet is a version of a prolonged fast. So it's longer than 2 days. So in periodic fasting, we know that somebody is fasting longer than 2 days. We need to be careful about metabolic numbers and metabolic factors and the safety of doing this. Also, people tend to get fairly hungry when that happens. And so what happened is Dr. Walter Longo, he's out of USC out in California, and he did a lot of research on this. He studies in longevity medicine. So knowing the benefits that fasting provides on the body, he did some studies to see how can we be able to create a model for fasting that makes it more doable. And so what he was able to do is he was able to create a system that actually balances out what the body can take in and think it's in a fasting state, but actually have a little bit of food going into it. So we have a very limited ratio of what happens. So let me describe a little bit better. For a fasting mimicking diet, on day 1, you're restricted to 1,100 calories. On the remaining 4 days, because it's a 5-day program, you're restricted to 800 calorie days. So it's not only the amount of food you eat, but it's what you eat and the proper ratios. So certainly don't expect anybody to remember the breakdowns, but for instance, on the first day, you have about 34% carbohydrates, 10% proteins, and 56% fats. But on those following days, you do 47% carbohydrates, 9% protein, and 44% fat. So those breakdowns are very, very well researched and well documented. And what he was able to show that when you have this direct ratio happening, your body stays in a ketogenic state to the point where we see autophagy, so cell lines being cleaned out. We see the circadian rhythms maintaining a normal hormonal release mechanism. And most importantly, we can see stem cell line renewal. So what are some of the benefits of this? The benefits we see is it burns deep body fat, and we always talk about that deep body fat. Sometimes you'll hear it described as white fat or brown fat. So that deep fat is actually what predisposes people to the most disease patterns. We can continue to have lean body mass. Initially, you'll actually see the lean muscle drop, but then it quickly rebounds and actually improves after the fast is over. We can modulate autoimmunity. So here at Vitality, we treat a lot of patients for autoimmune issues. So it's wonderful to be able to have another tool that helps our body actually heal ourselves. We can see improved thought processes and thinking. We can suppress overactive autoimmune cells. Decreasing body weight is a big one that everybody, of course, doesn't seem to mind. We can decrease blood pressure. Another one of those important inflammatory markers, which is CRP, to be able to use our diet and our body's responses to decrease that is fantastic. Of course, fasting mimicking diet, this is certainly one of the most restrictive diet plans you have that you can do, but at the same time, it has the highest potential benefits. So this periodic fasting, so in his protocol for the fasting mimicking diet, the protocol is actually 5 days a month for 3 months in a row. And those are what the studies are all based on, that they have the fantastic research data to prove. So knowing that you can take 5 days of a restricted eating and get these health benefits, you know, that's a really amazing potential list of things to benefit from. So also what's interesting is Dr. Longo very strongly agrees with Dr. Panda's research about time-restricted feeding. So putting together the ability to eat a lower calorie diet in very specific proportions for 5 days, in addition to keeping those nighttime hours or whatever your ratio of 12 hours of not eating would be, is an incredibly powerful system. So the beginning of ketogenesis and the depletion of that stored glycogen is really the beginning of fasting, and we see all of the benefits that happen, they occur after that. So what are some of the safety concerns we have or potential side effects? Hunger is probably the biggest thing. Many people didn't even know what hunger feels like, but hunger is actually the biggest side effect that people say, like, yeah, I'm kind of hungry. Hot water with lemon. There's so many different things that you can do. Feeling weak or like your brain isn't working well as you adjust is also something that people can notice. Certainly other side effects like dizziness or headache or low blood sugar, those can be seen. Now, people who do prolonged fasting, again, this all needs to be medically monitored. We worry about anemia. We worry about an immune system that's stressed too much. We worry about liver and kidney problems or even irregular heartbeats that can happen. So things that you need to watch out for. If you have a medical condition, of course, consult your physician. If you're going to do more than a 2-day fast, definitely consult your physician. If you have issues like diabetes or blood sugar problems, if you have low blood pressure or take medications, if you currently are underweight and don't have any excess weight to lose or have an eating disorder, then fasting is not something that you should try without significant medical counseling. If you're trying to get pregnant or if you're a female who doesn't have menstrual cycles, again, those need to be fully evaluated before you would go into a fasting program. So should you try it? One of the biggest suggestions I have is we need to eat real food. We need to take care of our sleep habits, and we need to have regular movement. Those are still the most important factors to focus on. If you see some of the things that we discussed tonight you could benefit from, whether it's weight loss or better hormonal control, whether it's fat regulation or maybe an immune system boost or your body's trying to heal, then those are the people who can really see a lot of benefits with fasting. The best diet for you is, of course, one that you can stick to in the long run, and that's usually going to, when we talk about fasting, it's going to be fasting in designated intervals. For instance, somebody might do 5 days of fasting every quarter or every 6 months. Or if you're looking to do something more aggressive, you might do the protocol that Dr. Longo has with the fasting mimicking diet. It's great for some people, and the only way to really find out is if you give something a try. So at the end of the day, there's no one size fits all solution. I hope that you understand that some of the key factors we look at are the circadian rhythm and how important it is that our genetics, all of our genes know when to turn on and when to turn off, and that's something we can control. We know that our hormones are better regulated at nighttime, and we also know that by putting a fasting stress on our body, we can completely clean out all of those damaged cells and actually stimulate new cell lines. So if you feel good when you're fasting and find it a sustainable way of eating, it can be an incredibly powerful tool to improve your health. And that's what gets us really excited, is if we can continue to help people improve their health, then we've done our job. So some of the resources that you can take a look at, after the webinar is over, you'll get an email that has the slides in it, so you'll be able to reference these. There's a couple of really interesting apps. There's one that's called the Zero app. It's a circadian rhythm and a fasting protocol application. My Circadian Clock is another one. This is the one that Dr. Panda came up with. It's fascinating that you can take pictures of your food and then clock in when you're going to fast for the night and in the morning, and the significant improvements people have in their health just from doing that application. There's an app called Prolon, and through the Fasting Mimicking Diet, it's actually the only dietary model that actually has a patent. And Prolon is the company that, when I was referring to the breakdown of nutrients that are very, very important on the first day and the following 4 days of a diet that acts like a prolonged fast, it's kind of hard to do that on your own. Now, there are some websites where you can get information, and you'll see 2 of those on the bottom there, where people talk about how you can do the fasting mimicking diet on your own. Prolon has actually come up with a kit, and it's a 5-day kit, and everything you need for that entire 5 days is in that Prolon kit. So here at the office, we're doing some really fun things. We're actually all doing the Prolon fasting mimicking diet right now. So it's really fun to go through it together and see what everybody's experiencing. So if you check out the Facebook and Instagram site, you're going to see all of our experiences through this week. We'll talk about how we feel. We'll talk about what the contents of the box are like. We'll talk about weight loss or any issues that we've been having. So you can check that out and see if Prolon is something that would be interesting for you. Amazon Prime has a great video. It's just called Fasting. And if you're an Amazon Prime member, then you can watch that video for free. So most importantly, it's really, it's necessary definitely to talk to your doctor to see if fasting is right for you, especially if it's going to be more than 2 days. Make sure your doctor understands fasting, and if they aren't informed on fasting, find someone who is. If you're looking for some specific markers of aging, some really great ones to have checked are your IGF-1 level, a fasting insulin level, glucose, and inflammatory markers like your CRP. So the last thing is we have an opportunity with Prolon to offer a discount. And if you go to the website that's listed there, if you're interested, you're actually able to get the Prolon kit and try out the fasting mimicking diet to see if you can produce some of these changes in your body as well. And we were able to, again, happily pass on a little discount for that. So hopefully that answers a lot of your questions you have about fasting. The 3 fastings that we know prolong longevity, again, are intermittent fasting, which is also time restricted, prolonged fasting, and fasting like the fasting mimicking diet. So those are the 3 we have research about, and those are 3 that we absolutely encourage here at Vitality. Of course, with monitoring for the last 2, anybody can do intermittent fasting. We highly recommend that last 12 hours. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a little chat question. And if not, then we will wrap things up shortly.
Trying to get your body into ketosis.
So what's interesting about ketosis, we know that it's a really efficient way for your body to burn fuel and fuel the brain. As far as should somebody do it, everybody's body is different. And so I think it's very, very important to pay attention to that. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of long-term studies telling us about the benefits of ketosis. So if you're looking at the different longevity centers, none of them promote a ketogenic diet long-term. And so that's one thing that I just kind of keep in mind, because they've been studying longevity for a very, very long time. We know that in most people, it's a healthy eating pattern. So it's hard to say. I'm certainly not going to make a blanket statement that you should do ketogenic diet afterwards. Certainly we like a whole foods diet, and the one that is balanced.
Can you fast 12 every day? And how does your body know you're fasting versus slow metabolism, because it thinks you're starving?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So what's interesting about that intermittent fasting, I would encourage everybody, as long as they are metabolically able to do that, to do a 12 and 12 fast. It's really just restricted eating. And I would hope that most people are close to that already. So for instance, if you eat dinner at 6 o'clock at night, it just means that you wouldn't eat again until 6 o'clock in the morning. So it's not something dramatic what we're doing. It's just letting the body know that on a regular schedule, this is the time we repair and this is the time we eat. It does get a little bit more sticky, especially for women when they start doing intermittent fasting longer than the 12 and 12 intervals. So if somebody is doing a 16-hour fast in an 8-hour window of eating, in some people, their bodies don't respond as well. So we see more metabolic issues in people who will eat lots of calories, and then they'll eat low calories for a few days, and then they'll eat lots of calories. So the body just gets more and more confused. So at least sticking to a basic rhythm lets your body know what's happening. In women, we worry when that fasting time frame goes more than 16 hours a day on a regular basis.
What can I drink during a 12-hour fast? Is that water only?
Water only. There are a few herbal teas that you can drink. They cannot have caffeine in it. Caffeine is actually a xenotropic, which means your liver has to work to break it down. So if your liver has to work to break something down, your body's not resting, it's actually doing work. So water and a few of the herbal teas are okay, but that's it. Okay, great. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. You'll get an email with the slides after this is over, and then we actually have a recording that will go up tomorrow that you'll be able to look at then. So hope everybody has a great evening.